The first atomic bomb was dropped on Hiroshima.
Over humanity!
The fires of frustration and discord are burning in every
Let us
city.
not forget for a moment the toils and efforts that lie ahead.
They say that those who forget their history are condemned to repeat it. This is the History Lessons Podcast with certified financial planning practitioner Patrick Huey, author of History Lessons for the Modern Investor, and your guide to financial wisdom in the past, present, and future. You ready? Good. Let's get historical.
Historical? Yes, quite. This is the History Lessons Podcast for the week of 3 June 2024, and I'm Patrick Huey, author of History Lessons for the Modern Investor. And if you're a modern investor seeking some historical perspective these days, brothers and sisters, you are not alone, and you're in the right place. This week, we'll be talking about flipping burgers, Operation Overlord, and retirement healthcare.
But first, the news.
Yeah, well, we were flipping burgers and enjoying the long weekend, taking last week off. I was reminded that the Fed's balance sheet has expanded from $870 billion in August of 2008 to $7.2 trillion today, a 733% increase. Yeah, your barbecue conversations may be different than mine, but Fed watching makes a lot more sense in this context, as the Fed balance sheet has represented the equivalent of an average of 33% of GDP over the last 4 years. Markets aren't focused much on economic data itself, but are trying to figure out what the Fed thinks about said data and how they might move that massive amount of money around or not. So that means more attention to things like inflation indicators, which don't exactly paint a holiday-like atmosphere. In our week off, single-family home sales declined 4.7% for April, while existing home sales declined 1.9%. Yeah, the housing market wasn't exactly bringing the fireworks. Meanwhile, the ISM Manufacturing Index declined to 48.7 in May. Manufacturing tried to party in March with a brief stay above the 50 mark, but it ended up back in the doldrums at 48.7 last month. That's 18 out of the last 19 months in contraction territory. Only 7 of 18 major manufacturing industries reported growth in May, and that's the economic equivalent of an empty cooler at the end of the picnic. Real GDP growth in Q1 was revised lower to 1.3% annual rate. Barbecues may have been sizzling, but the GDP growth certainly was not. Seems folks spent less on goods and slowed down on inventory stocking, dragging down personal consumption. Meanwhile, business investments in intellectual property and home building did their best to prop things up, but clearly it's not enough. Core GDP managed a 2.8% annual rate, which is a downgrade from the earlier 3.1% estimate. And guess what? Inflation didn't have a holiday, with the GDP price index tweaking down slightly to 3% annual rate, still a fair amount above the Fed's 2% target. Personal incomes rose 0.3% in April. Incomes are inching up, which is nice, but the Fed isn't thrilled since inflation keeps running hot. PCE prices, their favorite inflation measure, rose 0.3% in April, hitting a 2.7% annual rate and a toasty 3.8% rate over the past 3 months. Listen, inflation is caused by too much money chasing too few goods, always and everywhere. It's like leaving the grill on, full blast, even after everyone's had their fill. And now, even after you've cut off the propane, it just takes longer than people think for the grill to cool down.
Interest rates are rising, and your annuity purchased in the last decade might not be keeping up, which means your financial plan may be falling behind. So if you own a deferred annuity, fixed, indexed, or variable worth more than $250,000, now is the time to review it and make sure it is doing all that it can for you and your financial plan. Let us help you keep your retirement on track. Introducing Victory Independent Planning. VIP turns complex financial matters into clear and confident solutions, so you can relax and enjoy retirement whenever it arrives. Get the Annuity Review Kit now. This complimentary kit includes a variety of checklists, resources, and ebooks to review the fees, features, and flexibility, or lack thereof, in your current annuity contract. It will even help you assess your overall investment goals and the people who are offering you advice. Get the kit today, because you can't teach an old annuity new tricks. To learn how VIP can help you review your annuity, click on the link in the show notes or go to victoryindependentplanning.com. That's victoryindependentplanning.com. Sign up for peace of mind today.
Hey, Alexa, charge the Wayback Machine and set it for 1944 AD.
Charging Wayback Machine.
On June the 6th, 1944, Operation Overlord begins as Allied forces cross the English Channel to attack Fortress Europe. In the pre-dawn hours, C-47 Dakotas took to the sky in massive V formations to carry the 101st and 82nd Airborne Divisions over the English Channel to landing zones behind German lines. Many pilots became disoriented during these nighttime evasive maneuvers as anti-aircraft fire erupted from the German coastal batteries. Airborne troops were scattered throughout the French countryside, often miles from their intended drop zones. Likewise, faced with heavier than expected artillery and mortar fire, landing craft dropped their troops off target and occasionally in water over their heads. It was an inauspicious beginning to the Day of Days and the largest amphibious assault the world had ever seen. And yet, the Allies prevailed. Not because of their plan, noun, which was shredded the instant the first shot was fired, but because of their planning, verb, which emphasized small unit tactics and included junior officers and senior enlisted troops in preparing for the D and D+1 objectives. This reliance on non-general officers to continually assess their situation and, to borrow a phrase, improvise, adapt, and overcome was in stark contrast to the strict hierarchy of the German military. So here are the two main lessons for investors from Operation Overlord. First, the situation on D-Day was fluid and required rapid adjustments. Members of the greatest generation were up to the task, shifting lost troops, stray units to take crucial objectives. In investing, thorough research and due diligence are crucial before making any investment decisions. But your plan won't win the day unless you're active, flexible, and decisive. Number two, the D-Day operation relied on the collaboration of various experts in allied nations. Investors, you too, can benefit from seeking advice and leveraging the expertise of professionals.
Wayback Machine disengaged.
Returning to the year 2024.
Finally, this week, it's on to the mailbag.
You've got mail.
This week's question of the week was, what should I do about my healthcare benefits in retirement? Now, remember, if you're listening to this podcast and want to see the visuals referenced during this segment, please join us on Substack, where you can view the video version of this podcast, or on YouTube, where you can do the same. So I have a client, we're going to call him Alex, and he just retired within the last few weeks. And we were all set with everything on his income, tax, and investment planning, but he called me and wanted to tune up on his healthcare options and what he should do about Medicare for he and his wife. And we found a little wrinkle that definitely caught our attention while doing that. So let's take a look at some of the ins and outs of your healthcare planning for retirement, and then I'll come back and talk a little bit more about Alex's story. So the first major challenge that retirees face is the high cost of healthcare because, duh. But according to a report by Fidelity, a 65-year-old couple retiring in 2023 can expect to spend around $315,000 on healthcare throughout retirement. That includes premiums, copays, and out-of-pocket expenses. So yeah, that adds up pretty quickly. So what we need to think about here is managing these costs. And one key strategy is obviously to budget for healthcare expenses early on. It's one of the things that we do when we create financial and investment and retirement plans for clients. But here are a few basic tips. First of all, you've got to understand Medicare. It's the primary health insurance for most retirees, but it doesn't cover everything. Original Medicare includes Part A, which is hospital insurance, and Part B, which is medical insurance, but you'll probably also need Part D for prescription drugs. And you'll want to consider supplementing with a Medigap or a Medicare Advantage plan to cover your additional costs. If you need Medicare advice, feel free to reach out to me. We've got resources, and I know some experts that can help you through the process. You can always reach me at patrick@victoryindependentplanning.com. Second up, health savings accounts. Now, if you're still working and have a high deductible health plan, you should be contributing to a health savings account, or HSA, if possible. Your contributions are tax deductible, and your withdrawals for qualified medical expenses are tax-free. Plus, after the age of 65, you can use health savings account funds for non-medical expenses without penalty, though you still pay income tax on those withdrawals. My pro tip of the week is not to use your HSA for medical expenses before you retire if you can manage them out of your current cash flow. Why? Because of that big number we just pointed out that Fidelity says, at least $315,000 per couple, that you're going to need in retirement for medical expenses. And even if you don't need them, you can turn them on as a source of income in retirement. Long-term care insurance. This type of insurance can help cover the cost of long-term care services, which are not covered by Medicare. A lot of people make the mistake of thinking that Medicare has some sort of long-term care benefits to it. It really does not. So it's best to purchase your long-term care insurance in your 50s or 60s when premiums are more affordable, or you can look for alternatives like life insurance or annuities that have long-term care-like riders with them. Now, another significant challenge is navigating the complexity of the healthcare system. Understanding insurance plans, medical billing, and finding the right healthcare providers can be overwhelming, especially for older folks. So here are some strategies to simplify that process. First of all, stay informed. Educate yourself about Medicare and any other insurance options that you plan to use. If it feels too daunting, get some help. There are a lot of resources available, actually, including the official Medicare website, which actually isn't too bad for a government website, and counseling services like the State Health Insurance Assistance Program, or SHIP. And I also publish Medicare updates. So if you want to receive those via email, again, drop me a line at patrick@victoryindependentplanning.com. Now, something I learned in helping my own parents deal with medical issues is to advocate for yourself or have someone who is willing to do it for you. Don't be afraid to ask questions, seek second opinions, and be proactive about your healthcare, because it can lead to better outcomes and potentially lower costs. And you have to track and evaluate everything. You've got to write down just about every time you go in and see the doctor, because it's very easy to forget what you're told later on down the line. Now, to sum it up, planning for healthcare and retirement involves budgeting for your expenses, understanding your insurance options, staying informed, and then hopefully the one we really didn't talk about, which is maintaining a healthy lifestyle so you don't need as much healthcare as the average person in retirement. Okay, those are the basics, but let's go back to my story with Alex and see how his decision progressed with his health care and the issue we picked up on. Okay, let's take a quick look at this checklist, this week's checklist, which is, will healthcare change as I transition into retirement? Okay. Alex was not expecting to work after age 65, and he would not get health insurance as part of his retirement package. Okay. And he was not covered under his spouse's plan. In fact, it was the opposite. She was covered under his and had also just turned 65, which we're going to return to because it created an interesting wrinkle for us in this planning. Alex left voluntarily. He retired, left voluntarily and retired, and is indeed eligible for coverage under COBRA. COBRA is indeed expensive, but Alex and his wife are both high earners, and we had to compare the difference between COBRA coverage and the additional expense for Medicare premiums imposed on the high earners through the income-related monthly adjustment amount, or IRMA, which I have here on the checklist. What we found was kind of interesting, and it was about even when we compared the two. Looking at COBRA coverage versus what it was going to cost with the increased IRMA amount, it was almost about a wash. So we felt like we couldn't make a bad choice. Or could we? Because it turned out that since his spouse had already retired and had signed up for Part A, but not Part B because she was using Alex's insurance as her primary, that COBRA would not count. So we're coming down here to the checklist. Consider enrolling Medicare Part A when you turn 65. She did that. You can delay your Part B until you lose your employer-sponsored healthcare. She did that. But the question was, would going on COBRA count as employer-sponsored healthcare? And the answer was no. So if she didn't have qualified coverage, she was now looking at a penalty for delaying if she didn't enroll in Medicare Part D within 8 months of losing her healthcare plan. So that would have been 8 months from Alex's retirement date. Now, when you did the math there, it turned out that it would have been much more expensive to go on COBRA because of the penalty that the spouse would have incurred for late enrollment, and that late enrollment penalty lasts forever. So when we included that late enrollment penalty, the choice clarified for us. We needed to get them on Medicare within 8 months to save them some money, not just now, but in the future as well. Okay, so healthcare planning and retirement can get tricky. Well, my fellow historians, that's all for this week. Check out my book, History Lessons for the Modern Investor. That's still available on Amazon.com. And be sure to do all the social stuff with us, please. Like the episode. Follow us wherever you see or hear your podcasts. We're available on Substack, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube. Until next week, when we'll take another rollicking romp through the past and make an investment in your future with history lessons for the modern investor.
See you next week.